All right, let's jump right into this explainer. Today, we're unpacking a genuinely provocative and, I mean, absolutely fascinating geopolitical thesis from our source material. It's a perspective that literally throws traditional political science right out the window. Instead, it analyzes global power, Middle Eastern history, and the future of international relations purely through the cold, hard lens of thermodynamics and systems engineering. We are looking at a model that treats nations not as competing human ideologies, but as hardware, software, and inevitable system errors. So here's our system diagnostic menu for today. We'll be walking through 1. The Iranian motherboard, 2. Climate shifts and system errors, 3. The three-book monopoly, 4. The first mechanical reboot, and finally, 5. The 2026 scientific strike. Let's get right into it. Section 1. The Iranian scientific motherboard. Okay, so the source's baseline premise starts here. Ancient Iran isn't treated as some ancient myth. It's defined as the indispensable motherboard of civilization. Because of the vast road networks built by Cyrus the Great, it was the actual physical crossroads routing data between Africa, Asia, India, and Europe. Now, to run a motherboard, obviously you need an operating system, right? The text defines this original software as Amesha Shapanta. Developed in the Zagros Mountains, the source characterizes this as the original empirical laws of thermodynamics and work. This was human civilization's very first operational logic. It was a system built entirely on physics and measure, not on dogmatic tenets. And because it was a true global hub, the Iranian plateau actively exported this original source code. According to the model, the hub distributed logic to the West, cosmological math to India, and astronomical moon tables to China. The author presents this era as the absolute peak optimization of the ancient global system. Moving to Section 2, Climate Shifts and System Errors. You might be wondering, how exactly does a highly optimized scientific era just crash? Well, according to the source, it wasn't rival armies. It was the mechanical reality of climate change. Severe climate cycles introduced a massive entropic variable into the region. This environmental collapse created a profound system vacuum. And nature abhors a vacuum, right? The text argues this void was filled by what it calls the Abrahamic blackmail, basically replacing logical administration with doomsday scenarios, around 300 to 600 AD. These new systems thrived by offering miraculous salvation to populations that were completely traumatized by environmental entropy. To really illustrate this system error in action, the text points directly to the physical destruction of the ancient world's major data hubs, the burning of the great libraries in Egypt and Rome, and the destruction of the massive scientific academy of Gondeshapur. The source categorizes these not just as tragedies, but as the deliberate destruction of the old scientific hardware. Because think about it, dogmatic systems require a totally clean slate to install their own software, and that meant literally wiping the existing data centers. Which brings us to Section 3, the three-book monopoly. Once that original scientific data was purged, new operating systems took over completely. The author explicitly characterizes the central texts of the Abrahamic faiths, the Torah, the Bible, and the Quran, as a three-book monopoly. From the strict thermodynamic lens of this author, these are viewed as essentially dataless books, engineered purely to control populations through fear in a post-collapse high-entropy world. The source draws a really stark contrast here. On one side, you have the original Iranian software based on the secular principles of Asha, or order, which was entirely driven by empirical work and measure. On the other side, you have what the text bluntly classifies as viral software. This new code relies completely on doomsday fear, miracle worship, and dogmatic control, completely ignoring those original Mahistan principles of logical governance. Let's look at Section 4, the first mechanical reboot. So if the global motherboard was heavily corrupted by this viral software, how was the system ever reset? Well, the source frames the devastating 13th century Mongol invasions as the first return of the student. It's a brutal analogy, but the text argues the Mongols essentially functioned as a mechanical formatting of the hard drive. They swept into the hub to forcefully purge the dogmatic administrators and restore a baseline of scientific respect back to the center of the world. However, if the underlying hardware environment remains unstable, those errors are going to return. The explainer notes that another massive climate shift created a wave of secondary entropy. This renewed environmental instability essentially allowed the viral code to eventually reinstall itself. And according to the source, this error persists right into the modern era, manifesting as regimes that govern via religious narrative rather than thermodynamic reality. Finally, Section 5, the 2026 scientific strike.
This brings us to the absolute climax of this analysis, which is a highly specific, deterministic projection for May 2026. The source poses a truly fascinating scenario. Right now, the West's intense focus on Iran's nuclear materials acts as a massive entropic variable. But what happens when that chaotic element is completely removed, and the system is just allowed to settle according to the laws of geopolitical physics?
Well, the author outlines a purely mechanical deterministic transition. Step 1, the West resolves the nuclear issue and simply exits. Step 2, this exit creates a massive vacuum that mechanically pulls Iran fully into the sphere of the closest massive power, which is China. In Step 3, Iran inevitably transitions into a functional vassal state, completely absorbed by the Chinese economic and administrative engine. Now, the author points out a massive, almost tragic mechanical irony here. Imagine the scale of this miscalculation. The modern Iranian regime reportedly believes they are entering into an equal strategic partnership, all while actively clinging to unscientific dogma and what the text calls Mahdi worship. But China absolutely does not operate on religious narrative. China operates as a deeply secular, heavily data-driven power governed strictly by the deterministic laws of thermodynamics. And this, the source claims, is the second return of the student. Remember those ancient moon tables we talked about? Because China inherited that original ancient code of Asha, their predicted 2026 administrative takeover will mechanically overwrite those religious stories. It is framed as the inevitable dissolution of unscientific dogma by a far superior operating system. The current administrators, the so-called Mahdi worshippers, are going to face an unavoidable scientific strike. Ultimately, the model predicts that this modern student, China, returning to the ancient hub will effectively reclaim the motherboard. By totally overwriting a millennium of viral software with the original, ancient logic of work and measure, the center of the world will mechanically be restored to its rightful scientific state. As we wrap up this explainer, I really want to leave you with this provocative systems question. Are the massive world events we see on the news every day genuinely shaped by the passions of human beliefs and ideologies? Or are we actually just watching a deterministic global system relentlessly resetting itself, driven by the unavoidable laws of thermodynamics? It's a wild paradigm shift, for sure. Keep this thermodynamic model in the back of your mind as you watch global events unfold leading up to 2026.